Okay, guys, before we jump in, you know the drill by now. If you haven't subscribed already, hit the link in our show notes to get our weekly e-letter. It goes out to hundreds of men all around the world with game-changing psychology to help you do life better. Right, once you've done that, let's jump in.
Whole Man Academy. Because the world needs strong men. Whole Man Academy is changing the game for men around the world. It's for guys who want to live an epic life of fun and adventure, no matter what. We believe, deep down, all men want to go on their own hero's journey to becoming resilient, confident, fearless, and fulfilled. Listening to be inspired by guys who don't settle for living a life of mediocrity. This is your call to action and call to adventure. Are you ready?
Okay, so this is the Whole Man Academy podcast, episode 108. My guest today, I'm excited to speak to him, is Ross Anderson, also known as the motivational dude. We're going to come on to that. We could give him some labels. We love labels these days. Speaker, psychologist, consultant, specialises in wellbeing sciences and human optimisation, which is a word which we use a lot here at the Whole Man Academy. So, mate, how are you and where are you?
I'm good. I'm in Glasgow. I'm warm. I just had a lovely warm bath, no candles, sadly. And as I was saying to you, unfortunately, no Enya. But it was nice. I use the bath as like a sauna when generally my little girl comes in early on a Friday evening. So rather than going to the sauna, I just pop the little temperature gauge into the bath and make sure I'm operating at a particular temperature. Sounds a bit scientific. And I sit there for 30 minutes. So increases BDNF, but also relaxes you at the same time.
But do you know what? I mean, there's so many, when I was like researching, and I don't pretend I do like deep research on people. I love to skim if they've got Instagram, because that kind of gives a window to their soul. Have a look at their website, see what common words come up. Mm-hmm. And I realized with you, and I said before we start recording, we're not short of things to talk about because you've got many strings to your bow. But I wanted to talk first. Let's jump into something that I noticed you did, which was your TED Talk. Now, I think for a lot of people in maybe kind of the well-being space, a TED Talk is, I'm not necessarily saying it's a pinnacle of their career, but it's something they all aspire to maybe deliver. So what was that like for you?
Disastrous. I despise watching it back, and I'll tell you why. And by the way, it wasn't, just to clarify, it wasn't like the big TED stage.
They do the smaller ones.
They do the smaller ones. So it was the University of Glasgow's TEDx, which is kind of a tier down. That's not to say that I didn't have the opportunity to go and speak at the TEDx Glasgow about 3 years ago, which I did. It just didn't work out timing because I had some major opportunities with Dell, and then ended up becoming their national ambassador for mental health and wellbeing. So that paid off, thankfully. But the reason that was disastrous was because at that time, so this was about 4 years ago, and you can watch it online, and I hate to watch it, it's painful, and I'll tell you why. So irrespective of it not being the big TED, it was big for me because it still had that label of TEDx. And at that time, although I'd spoken in front of rooms of 100 and 200, this was 450 people. And it was the first time I ever felt like I was a real speaker. What I mean by that is you get your mic and you have a dressing room and you have a name badge and what would you like for lunch and all that sort of stuff. And it was a lovely experience. And there was some big speakers there as well. So what happened was I was billed to be the 5th speaker, if I remember correctly. However, and you get to know everyone else that, you go there, you do some prep, they get to know you, the team get to know you, you get to know the other speakers. So I was billed to go 5th, and then there was a problem. So speaker number 1 was in a car accident. And because I was, I guess you could say, the most, at least seemed to be the most confident, socially adept, most loose, most relaxed, they said, "Oh, Ross will go first."
Great.
Without even asking me, Ross will go first, just assuming. And they were like, "Ross, you're going first. You're up in 10." Now, I'm sure you've been on stage, whether it be, running your events. Maybe you've not done a lot of keynotes, but you need to prep yourself. I need to change my state. You know, I need to do some state shifting exercises to get rid of that negative, stressful energy that we all go through. Because, you know, as much as I've spoken in front of tens of thousands of people, I've spoken multiple times, still get nervous. Doesn't matter. It's
and there's
still
a process as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a process. And I like to visualize, I like to bounce around, I like to do affirmations, different things to get into the right headspace so that I can deliver value. Anyway, so I go on stage, and the way TED operate is they'll have you have 3 screens. So you have your main screen that you can see. So the audience are looking at you and you've your slides behind you, but you have your main screen, which has your notes.
Right.
You have another screen, which shows the slides behind you. And then you have another screen that shows the next slide. Okay. So that you can, you know, enabling you to be in a flow state.
Yeah.
But the clicker was broken. So every time I was clicking to see my notes, to trigger, you know, my memories and then recall the information, because I was so nervous, and it was, for me, it was a big deal. I was clicking like 3-4 times and it wasn't working. And the team noticed this and they were trying to fix this. But as you know, there's only a certain amount of stress that you can handle in situations like that. So the start of the talk was really, really off. And it was the first time that any of my friends and family had ever come to see me speak.
Great. And
it was just this surge of stress. And I muscled my way through it. I managed my way through it, but it was not my best showing. And I think if you know, maybe a listener goes and looks up that talk, they might be like, oh, that's not that bad. And it isn't that bad, but it was, you know, how I felt. And I know now what I'm capable of. Yeah. But yeah, it was an awkward experience. So rather than me leaving feeling elated and all hyper and excited and, you know, ready to take on more challenges of gargantuan proportions, that wasn't the case. I left feeling deflated, down, underconfident. It took me a while. It almost gave me, I remember, it was like someone took depression and injected it into my arm. Yeah. And I felt because I take my reputation seriously. So I put my all into this, and there was so much preparation that goes into an 18-minute TED talk.
Yes. Yeah.
And I had the talk nailed, and then all these problems just came up, and I wasn't equipped for that. Now, if that happened, I'd be like, oh, forget it. But I was I don't talk from memory as such now. Well, I do, but what I mean by that is I talk more in visions, and I never know what I'm going to say. But irrespective of that, now I perform better. Whereas back then it was more I was trying to memorize word for word, which is very different.
Even as you said it, I felt the, you know, I haven't spoken in front. I think the biggest crowd I spoke in front of is like 150. That was at Barclays at Canary Wharf. Okay. But still, it's those moments when something goes wrong. You want to be channeled into what you're supposed to be doing, not thinking in the back of your mind. So I understand that.
By the way, so I'd like to tell you quickly about my very first experience doing a big talk. So I'd only spoken in front, maybe three talks. I'd delivered 3 or 4 talks for mental health charities and like a friends volunteer group at university. And then I was asked along to speak at a school. Right. Now, knowing what I know now about preparation and speaking on stage, keynote speaking, what I agreed to do was just, it was not a good idea. It was very dangerous. So what I mean by that is, they said, would you give back-to-back keynotes, 3 45-minute keynotes with short breaks in between? I thought, I can boss this. I can ace this. I'll be able to do that. And then I had a workshop at the end of the day. And it was in front of 1,000 people. So going from speaking in front of 10, 20 to 1,000 people. And by the way, we're talking school kids here. Yeah. You know, who don't really filter their words. So it was teachers, students and staff, but predominantly school kids for the age of 14 to 18. And what happened was I had these 3 speeches ready to rock. It was the same speech back to back. And I remember the week before, I'm going up and I'm on stage and I'm prepping and I'm speaking to the janitor and I've got the music set up and the slides and everything. It got to the day and I didn't forecast for how long it would take for the kids to get seated. So I thought, oh, they'll come from class, they'll be seated in 5 minutes, you know, a couple of minutes just to settle themselves and off I'll go. But it took them 20 minutes to get seated. And the whole time I'm thinking, shit, how do I cut this? What chapter do I skip to? How do I manage? And I stood on stage, everyone looking at me, and I choked. It was like the scene from 8 Mile. He's choking. And I stood and my hand was shaking. I was on stage and it was like the longest minute of my life. And my voice was all over the place. It was, it was croaking. And I managed to it was horrible. It was not a nice experience. And I was terrified. I left stage. I ran to the toilet. I didn't know if I was going to shit myself or be sick. And I had to gather myself. And I knew that I had in that moment, I could have left. But, I knew that I was in this situation where I was so focused on being better and realizing more of myself compared to my past life when I didn't have those opportunities. I didn't have those opportunities to say yes or no. And there was nothing like that. So I thought, govern your bitch mind here and get back on that stage. And I managed that. I muscled through the next one and I got that out. I recalled it all from memory, word by word. And then the third one, I got a standing ovation.
Right.
So I always always reflect and think, if I only done one speech that day, would I ever have continued doing would I be where I'm at right now?
Isn't that, it's so interesting because I know it's a bit like, getting back on the horse, but I think anybody that does a decent amount of speaking is going to have one where, like you say, there's a curveveball thrown at you, be it tech or whatever. And I know I've had it where I've done the Zoom ones where you're just looking at basically and you think, I wonder if anybody's there. I wonder if the feed got cut after half an hour. I'm just talking to myself. But I wonder with you, I mean, that must feel like a world away talking in front of that many people to kind of, your upbringing. So I just wondered if you could give the guys listening even kind of a quick potted history of like how you got to where you are. Because I know it wasn't all smooth sailing, to state the obvious.
Yeah, so I guess the problems start when I was about 4. So mum and dad split up, and dad was in and out of my life for a period of time until I was about 14. And what he would do was, he'd say, come back in, son, I love you, fuck off. Come back in, son, reject. Come back in. And that was his way for a while, and it pained me. And he would be absent and then present, absent and present. But I didn't really know how much it was affecting me. I had a lot of daddy issues that filled me. Those experiences filled me with a lot of confusion, anger, and rage. I acted up in school, got into a lot of fights. I was put in a behaviours card. I have rheumatism. I have arthritis in my right hand because I've injured it 16 times through breaks, fractures, and dislocations. So if you could get a better picture of my hand, it's all over the place. Yeah. All my bones in the centre of my hand are fused together. It's a mess. I can't write for long periods of time. When I eventually got to university, I had to sought the help of a scribe. Right. So anyway, digressing here, but I got into a lot of trouble and I was very emotionally reactive. And I never really realised my academic potential at school. Big part of that is because of the way the educational system is set up. Less than 5% of our global Western curriculum is dedicated to health, well-being, and personal development. So it's no wonder then that we get into our 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and we're all a bit messed up. Yeah. So I can put part of the blame on the institution, and then I think the rest of it comes down to my upbringing and my environment. raised in a single parent impoverished family, mum who worked 3 jobs. Bit of a cliche in many respects, but that was the way of it, speaking factually. And I was investigated in high school for selling and smoking cannabis, and almost expelled. And again, I left school at 17. I bounced around from unfulfilling job to unfulfilling job. And that's when my drug dealing and drug taking intensified to the point where at 19, I take my first overdose. It wasn't that I wanted to end my life. It wasn't an intentional overdose. It was the result of living a toxic life and Magaluf. I take my first overdose at 19, my second at 22, and then in between that period, I experienced a load of challenges. I'm diagnosed with panic disorder. So for your listeners, that's a very intense, acute form of anxiety where you may have multiple panic attacks every single day. So a panic attack can feel like you're having a heart attack.
Right, nice.
And I was having multiple of those every single day. And by the way, I had a persona. I created this new Ross to survive in my environment. I was selling drugs. There was a point where I was making close to £10,000 a month selling drugs. I remember at 19, my mother threw me out the house. She caught me with, I had this shed out the back garden, and I used to do a bit of construction work. So I'd constructed this shed so that you could lift a piece of concrete up. There's a carpet, and you know, it was invisible almost, and in there was a chest, and in that chest there was at times kilos of cannabis, kilos of soft black, which is a sort of form of cannabis, thousands of ecstasy, you know, ounces of cocaine. You know, I was all in. I even sold cigarettes and counterfeit clothing and false fake Ray-Ban sunglasses. You know, you name it, I did it.
Never usually with one thing, does it?
Yeah, exactly. And so coming back to this point about that persona, you can imagine, you know, I wasn't the Ross I was supposed to be. I was this other guy. And by the way, I'm a baby-faced guy. I'm a softie, and I'm 5'9", so it doesn't really match that persona and what I'm speaking about. But the only place at that time in my life when I was dealing with this anxiety that I felt safe was crying in my mother's arms or strapped up to a heart monitor in the back of an ambulance. So I was very vulnerable, but at the same time pretending to be this other guy to survive in this environment. And then the autoimmune issues kicked in. I lost friends to heroin, crime, suicide, and I take a second overdose. And you'd think things couldn't get much worse for me. Then my lawyer turns and tells me, you know, you're looking at 2 years in jail for this. And I was terrified because multiple offences from the age of 15, 16 had compounded over time. And I'd used all my get out of jail free cards. And here I am faced with this sentence of 2 years in jail. And I've sought the advice of 2, 3, I believe, lawyers, and they all said the same. Look, there isn't much we can do for you. You know, you've already laid your bed, pack your bags. And so I was already starting to make some positive shifts in my life. Before the event took place, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Not because I just wanted to. I'd broken up with this girl. I was consistently going back and forth with this girl. You know, my life was chaotic. She was bulimic. She was addicted to drugs, as was I. I was trying to pull myself away from that world. Her mum and dad were swingers. The dad was abusive. He beat the mother. He beat the daughter. You know, there's all sorts of stuff going on. My mum got married to an ex-SAS soldier who had PTSD issues and alcohol. He was an alcoholic and he didn't like me. You know, there's only room for one alpha in the house. So we fought like cat and dog, or should I say he kicked the shit out of me. So there was loads of stuff going on. It wasn't a very nice existence. I could go on and on and on and tell you about loads of other things. But I don't want to play the whole woe is me thing too much. But yeah, I mean, fast forward to the court case. And I'm standing in front of the magistrate. Court starts at 9. I'm the last person to be seen at 4. And all my family are there. Bags are packed, and the magistrate calls me up, you know, Ross Anderson. And I approach. And as she's talking about all the circumstances, I'm off in the distance thinking, you know, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
How did I get to this point? And I'm thinking, you know, was it because of XYZ external thing? Was it because I was raised in a single parent impoverished family? Was it because, you know, my dad left and rejected me? Was it because I didn't have any positive male mentors? Was it because of the drugs? XYZ external thing. And then I realized it wasn't necessarily because of those external things. It was how I was living my life internally. You know, I was never really up until that point fully switched on, self-aware, conscious, cognizant, call it what you want. You know, life was happening to me versus for me. Stuck in that passenger seat. And as I'm having this realization, the magistrate's voice kind of snaps me back into reality, and she says 3 words that me nor my family anticipate hearing. She says, "Fortunately, this time." And in that moment, you know, it wasn't obviously I had this second chance, this big opportunity, but it wasn't like a big X Factor moment. You know, there wasn't any Katy Perry music or confetti bursts. You know, it was quite sobering, but it was exactly what I needed. And there was consequences: community service, tag, probation, put in a list, wasn't allowed to work with vulnerable adults and kids, denied access to America, loads of stuff, but it was far better than the alternative. And I was certain I was going to jail, but unbeknownst to me, that year, so there's 14 months before the court case came about. And in that year, I had applied to go to college not because I needed to, because I wanted to. I was on that path. I wanted to change. And I met what I would call my 3 Mr. Miyagi's. To you, Anthony, they'll just be college lecturers. But to me, you know, if you know the storyline of the Karate Kid, Daniel's son has these self-limiting thoughts, and Mr. Miyagi, you know, the wise mentor, helps him transcend those self-limiting thoughts. And at the time, you know, I'm thinking, why should I be studying psychology and philosophy and the likes, these academic topics, because I'm just some idiot for the back arse of nowhere. And they helped me overcome that. And I rose to the top 5% of the class, applied to go to university. I'm given, granted 5 unconditionals. I accept to go to Glasgow University. At the time, it was recognised as number 4 in the UK for neuroscience and psychology. I'm all excited, but the joy was short-lived. I'm at Glasgow University for 1 month, and then that court case happened. So it was a very all over the place time in my life. But ultimately, you know, after that decision was made, and I was going to mention that those 3 Mr. Miyagi's, my college lecturer, unbeknownst to me at the time, had written 3 individual letters to the magistrate talking about who I was and the potential that I had shown, and that they believed that I was capable of a lot, and you know, and that was a game changer for me. And she, you know, must have read those letters, and it must have resonated with her, or they must have resonated with her, and she gave me a second chance, you know, and I grasped it. And I'm a firm believer that when you don't have any belief in yourself, you have to lean into someone else's belief in you, and trusted in them. I did that, and I moved forward. And I don't have the power of foresight, so I had no idea that I would be where I'm at now. But what I had conviction with was the thought that, you know, I could be a little bit better, or as we say in Scotland, a wee bit better. And I carried that belief consistently, and went on a 10-year mission to learn as much as I possibly could about how to navigate this life as best I could. And
I think that's where it gets. That's where it gets exciting on the life story of whoever will play you. That is the moment the Rocky montage comes in, because suddenly I don't know if was it called like a fuck it moment, where you're like, right, you know, because at some point, I know when I was out in Miami, I say with Tony Robbins, you know, at an event, and he was standing in front of me, and he was telling someone he kind of plucked out the crowd, you know, that we all know that, you know, you can make a decision like that, and then, you know, everything can change. I just wonder for you, at what point did you kind of realize that your career was going to be in, let's call it well-being, as opposed to anything else?
So the way it happened for me was I was in Glasgow University. I was studying neuroscience, positive psychology, psychological disorders, evolutionary psychology, and sleep psychology. So I started immersing myself in that. And luckily for me, the neuroscience and psychology building was right next to the microbiology building. And so I was fascinated by that too. And I took an extra, so on the summer holidays, I wanted to study physiology as well. So I just immersed myself in all these things. But I think what I was doing was I wasn't just studying it from a book. I wasn't just studying it academically. I was living it. I was trying these things out. I was like being the human guinea pig, and I'm still that to this very day. And I was growing rapidly. I was changing rapidly for the better. I was still working through my own stuff. I was changing rapidly for the better. And then what happened was I realized that knowledge had such a profound effect on me, and I started to ponder curiously, could it help other people in the same way? And that's when I started to open up about my own experiences, thoughts, philosophies. And that was when I was about 27. So I was going into my honours year. And what I would do is, so Glasgow University's library, at the very top of the building, there's these rooms that you can hire out. It's about 5 levels, and they were always booked out. And if you'd be very lucky to get one for 2 hours. You could get one for a 2-hour slot. So what I would do at the very start of the week is I would galvanize all my friends, and I would say, right, you go in there with your library card and you book out 8 to 9 or 8 to 10, sorry. I'll go in and book 10 to 12. Martin, can you get it? Martin was my best friend. Can you get in and get 12 to 2? Jennifer, can you get in and get? And I would go in there for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours sometimes, and do my studies. And then after my studies were finished, I would sit, and I had these big whiteboards, and I was just sitting, I would think about, I'd read books, and then I would watch YouTube videos, and I would think about, what I wanted to do with my life. And we were doing this module at the time called professional skills. And there was a section in it called self-awareness. There was a section in it all about self-awareness. And I didn't really know what self-awareness was, even then, really. And, everyone in the year, they spent maybe a day on that section. I spent 6 weeks on that section. And I engaged in this exercise, and I would call the exercise, "This is your life." So our lecturer encouraged us to go back through our lives. So at the time I was 27, you were to go through your life in 5-year increments, and look at all the kind of positives, which were visually depicted on in a peak. So let's say you have a line, the positives were all in a peak at the top of the line, and the negatives were all sort of an inverse peak at the bottom, if that makes sense, almost like a graph. And I was going through it all, and I was learning more about myself, and I was putting two and two together. And you know, when you look at two of the most common psychological disorders known to man, anxiety and depression, when people go for therapy, what often happens is that they don't know how they got to where they were. They can't really articulate how they got to where they're at in terms of how they're experiencing this much anxiety and depression. And so I was like, wow, I'm putting two and two together. I'm making sense. I can reflect. I'm gaining insight. And it just got the ball rolling. And I was thinking about the professional aspects of my life, or where I wanted to go. I knew I didn't want to get into academia like my friends, because to be honest, I love intellectualizing my academics, but they over intellectualize. And I had this entrepreneurial spirit. Believe it or not, I almost went off on a different path. At university, I was working selling trainers for Nike, and I was also working as a topless butler. But I loved it, and I ended up almost running the organization, facilitating events, you know, making sure that all the girls were having a great experience. And I was one of the only butlers who didn't drink or didn't take drugs or didn't take steroids. You know, I was all about service, and I've always been about service. I love servicing people. I love take that out of context. I love helping people have a good time, I guess is what I'm saying, adding value. I love that. And I had that entrepreneurial spirit there, but really I wanted to do something with wellbeing sciences, human optimization. I always felt like I wanted to be the me that I never had. So I had all these painful experiences. I didn't have the people there to help me, or the individual there to help me, the wise mentor, the Mr. Miyagi. And all scenarios of life, when I was having experienced autoimmune issues, mental health issues, you know, when I was starting my business, I wanted to be that for other people. So that's when I went on that more purposeful path. I left university. I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to be a consultant, a wellbeing sciences consultant. I just didn't know how. So I just tried everything and anything. First I went and, you know, I'd done a thing called the motivational dude, as you said. That was my alias. Name was picked for me, not by me. I'd done the motivational dude screw the nut to all across Scotland, all these different schools, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't a very sustainable business model because schools don't pay very well.
So at some point, bills have to be paid. And
exactly. And then I started working with athletes, and I didn't like it because a lot of them had egos. And then I got into the corporate field, and I've done loads of different work, particularly with Dell. Long story short, they loved the value that I was adding. And I was working for nothing, really. I wasn't even asking for travel expenses, sundries, nothing. You know, I'd done a lot for free, added so much value, but I was passionate. And then what happened was I have this meeting, and I was supposed to meet with 2 women from the Glasgow site. I end up meeting up with 4 women from you know, senior ranking individuals. I'm asked to give a big introduction. At the end of that meeting, they asked me to be their national ambassador for mental health and wellbeing. A week later, I'm meeting Michael Dell, name drop, the 37th richest man in the world. It was an experience. It felt like meeting Obama or, you know, something like that, whereby, you know, I wasn't allowed to have my phone, social media blackout. And ultimately that label of Dell's National Ambassador for Mental Health and Wellbeing, that was worth its weight in gold, and it opened up many doors. And again, the whole corporate thing I've been doing now for about 4 years, and I've learned a lot. And I think, you know, these are other people's words, not mine. People have told me that you've been able, Ross, to achieve in 4 years what it takes some people 10, 20, 30 years, what some people don't even achieve. And I wondered why, and I reflected on that. And I think it just all boils down to me being a people person, me giving a shit, me wanting to create results, and me being all about mastering my craft and loving what I do deeply. I would do it all day, every day. And my ultimate goal is just to write books and do self-funded research. So I'll shut up now because I've been off on one, but that's how that, I mean, there's loads more to the story and how I became a consultant, but that's the kind of whistle stop tour.
The word that came to my mind there was relentless. And I realized, you know, in this space, you can't play at it. If you're going to get anywhere, it doesn't just happen overnight for most people. You know, it's not necessarily about luck. Sometimes it could be, you know, some people, but ultimately you also got to be able to kind of walk the talk, and perform and help people. And that's why when I was looking at your stuff, you know, I always find, you know, I look at lots of different people, and not everybody can resonate with you, if that makes sense.
And nor should they, because everyone's different. Everyone has different drives.
That's it. We've all got that different. And for me, I always think it's, I like things to be, when I say kept simple, I mean to put in terms that I think that me in the city could have just sat and listened to, not have to sit and kind of be like, I don't understand what that word means. I like it when it's, let's say, a people person.
That's a sign of wisdom as well, being able to simplify everything you're saying and not overcomplicating things.
Yeah, because otherwise, and this is one of the things I think is important. Otherwise, you can come out with the highly technical stuff, but if a lot of people it goes over their head, then they won't implement it, and then it's a fucking waste of time. Because there's I was saying, knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing.
And so, at the start of the session, I mentioned I was in the bath, and the reason I do that is because it produces BDNF. Now, and I could really sound smart by saying, it's a 20 quid word, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. But really, if you're looking for the simple terminology, it's miracle growth of the brain. And the reason is because, in the 1970s, they had these brain cells preserved in a petri dish. They sprinkle some BDNF on it, and it causes the brain cells to propagate and grow, hence i.e. neurogenesis. So, it's all about, giving the scientific stuff and the intelligence and stuff, but breaking it down into simple components so that people can understand it. Because ultimately, that's my goal, is for people to play an active role in their health, well-being, and their potential. And simple is great. Well,
let's talk about sleep quickly, because I know, with the Whole Man Academy, we've got guys in multiple countries. I think it's about 45, 46 different countries that guys listen.
Wow.
But, I try and find, a common thing there is it's important for you to sleep well. And being either someone that, some of the guys will be professional guys who might be still partying or working late and burning the candle, looking at screens a lot, or some like us, say young dad. I'm not young, but I'm only a guy with kids in their 3 to 5 years.
And then at 9:30, I am now.
and one of their sleep has been fucking terrible, I've said it on the podcast, but it's over. Bowie's 3, not even 3, will be in September, but he's only slept through the night 3 or 4 times in his entire life.
Right.
And that can, that can up on you.
It affects you. It certainly does.
I'm only 22, but I look a lot older. So for you, like, where does it start when you're talking to people about sleep? Because there's so many different angles to go down for a guy.
Okay, so my passion for sleep started when in 3rd year I was introduced to sleep. It was how I was introduced to sleep science or sleep psychology. You can use those terms interchangeably. I had this lecturer, this American lady called Dr. Stephanie Biello. She's the dean of Glasgow University's bio neuroscience department. And most lecturers throw loads of theory at you, but right off the bat, she has a room about 50, 60 students, and she turns us into human guinea pigs. So she puts us through, and by the way, at that time, my sleep was not good.
Okay.
It was broken. I was waking up 5, 6 times a night. It was all over the place. You look at the power of regularity with your sleep-wake cycles and your circadian rhythm, and the importance of that. 24-hour cycle, and mine was all over the place. Some nights I'd be up to 1, some nights I'd be going to bed at 10, some nights it'd be 3. It was all over the place, as you would imagine as a university student, but it was really affecting me. And I had some autoimmune issues at that time as well, low level stuff, and it was exacerbating those too. So what happened was she put us through this test for about 3 weeks. And we had to follow all these particular parameters, some of the more common ones. So wake up in the morning, expose ourselves to light, which is because, in your eye, you've got your optic nerve, and when light comes through that optic nerve, it travels through and interacts with your sort of master regulator, which is another fancy sounding word, your suprachiasmatic nuclei, the SCN, and that controls a lot of stuff in relation to your sleep. I think of it as like, Homer Simpson and his little nuclear power plant pressing all these buttons, and that's why, because when you do that, light comes in through your eye, travels through your optic nerve, hits the suprachiasmatic nuclei, and your brain produces, brain influences your body to produce hormonally daytime hormones versus nighttime hormones, and it starts to regulate that. And so she was encouraging us to expose herself to light, to exercise at regular times during the day. There's various things you want to be doing. It's when you wake up, when you expose yourself to light, when you eat your first meal, when you exercise, when you eat your last meal, and when you go to bed at night, and all these sorts of things. There's key questions and key indicators. And she had us follow all these parameters. parameters. And within about 2 or 3 weeks, 90% of the cohort was sleeping like babies. You know, they'd improved their energy, mood, and mojo. And I just became fascinated by the science. And she started then telling us about the, you know, the glymphatic system. Are you aware of the glymphatic system, Anthony?
I've heard of it. This is what I love, is when you talk to people and you can say, could you explain it in the most basic terms? So anybody listening will be like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. So in the most basic term, so most of us have heard of the lymphatic system, or at least we kind of know what it is. You get on well, your lymph nodes swell under your armpit, your groin, your throat, underneath your chin. So the glymphatic system is like the cousin of the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system is a network of nodules and tissue that are present throughout the body, which basically works to detoxify the body. And there's 10 times more lymph fluid in the body than there is blood, and and to make that system function optimally, a prerequisite of that is you need to move. You know, stagnation. That's why they say sitting is the new smoking. So you go to the gym, you sit for an hour. That's, you know, it's good. But if you sit for the rest of the day, then you're going to be deactivating your lymphatic system. You encourage lymphedema. You can cause cancer cells to propagate, so on and so forth. So anyway, that's the lymphatic system. But the cousin of that is the glymphatic system. And I like to think of it as like the Kim and Aggie. Can you remember Kim and Aggie? The Kim and Aggie. So those two women that cleaned up the houses, or better yet, for your non-UK listeners, it's like the bin man, like a rubbish man of the brain. So, you know, the lymphatic system stops at your neck. But what about your most expensive real estate? You know, this thing encased in your bony cortex, your brain, you know, because that controls everything, and without it, you're mush, you're nothing, you cease to exist. And so the glymphatic system, what's interesting about it is when you go to sleep at night, it activates. So it starts to hoover effectively at night. So the cleaning occurs at night. And interestingly, your brain cells within your brain shrink up to 60%. Now, that's akin to, you know, when you're in the sitting room or the living room, and let's say you're, you know, a family member or your wife or you yourself are actually hoovering, and someone lifts up their leg so that you can get into all the little nooks and crannies, you can get into all the tight spaces to cleanse all that residue. And they say that wakefulness is low-level brain damage and sleep is the recuperative solution. I'll say that again. Wakefulness is low-level brain damage and sleep is the recuperative solution. So when we're awake, and, you know, like right now, you and I are talking, it's expensive, energetically expensive for our brains to do so. We interact with people, we engage in reflection and tasks and such. We use our executive functions, memory, recall, all these sorts of things. That creates neurotoxic residue, and that builds up and amasses throughout the day. But sleep is the recuperative solution. And what happens is when we sleep, the brain cells shrink. There's this liquid and interstitial fluid that is washed throughout the brain, which captures all of this neurotoxic residue and releases it and cleanses it through your spinal cord system. And so you get this kind of cleansing effect. And that's why they say like cognitive decline and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's can start as early as your 20s, because what's happening is we're not cleansing or detoxifying this neurotoxic residue that's building up. What then happens is, so each of your neurons fire in a linear manner, in a straight manner, and this neurotoxic residue causes a buildup of TACs and beta amyloid plaques, should I say, beta amyloid plaques and tangles. Effectively, that's like the equivalent of your cell firing linearly versus it being tangled up, like a stray pubic hair, how a stray pubic hair looks in a bathtub, you know, it's all kind of curled up. It goes from a straight firing linear signal to curled up, misfiring, dies, and it degrades and dies. But sleep is the recuperative solution for that. So that's just one reason why, you know, you want to be, if you're dealing with brain fog, memory issues, cognitive impairment, or you want to just optimize. And it's also been associated and correlated with, you know, mental health issues, exacerbation, maybe not causally, but exacerbation of mental health issues. So, you know, sleep is fascinating. And there's all sorts of other studies out there. There's studies that fascinate me by Michael Prather. He's a Californian researcher. I have some contact with him, and he was able to showcase that even so there's an inverse relationship that occurs with sleep in your immunity. Right. And so what happens is, when your sleep improves, when it goes up, so say like 7 to 9 hours, when your sleep increases, so does the robustness of your immune system. However, when the duration of sleep, the hours of sleep, quantity of sleep decreases, your immune system depreciates. And what I mean by that depreciation is, so they've looked at the sweet spot for sleep is 7 to 9 hours, depending on what you've been doing throughout the day, physical exercise, mentally demanding job, how much you've eaten, those sorts of things. The sweet spot is 7 to 9 hours. When you drop below 7 hours, that's where we see objective impairments occur, physiologically and psychologically. And when it pertains to the immune system, your natural killer cells start to decrease, and your natural killer cells, or NK cells as they're known, they're like your, think of the movie Saving Private Ryan. They're like your guys on the front, like, fending off threats from infections and diseases and cancerous cells every single day, right now as we speak, which is mad to even consider. Under the threshold of conscious awareness, this is what's going on. And it makes sense, because we know subjectively that when we're younger, or maybe not even when we're younger, but right now, if we were to go on holiday and we were to hammer it, and we were to drink a lot of alcohol for 3, 4, 5 days, impair our sleep, stay up, our sleep-wake cycles are all over the place, we're eating inflammatory foods, what happens? Well, your holiday is not refreshing and restorative. You come back and you could get sick. You get unwell. That's often what happens, or you get sick actually on holiday when the adrenaline subsides. So again, another reason why sleep is important. And I just find it fascinating that right now, you mentioned something about your no, I'm wrong. I picked you up wrong. But what I was going to say was, earlier on, before we started this podcast, we were talking about our father-in-laws. So my father-in-law, Fraser, who I love, I'll try not to get emotional, he's one of my best friends. He, for his 50th birthday, got diagnosed with a rare form of lymphoma 5 months ago. Now, he is the type of guy who is, there's areas in the west of Scotland where I'm from, whereby, the life expectancy is, 60 if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because the way we live our lives and the cultural conditioning that goes on. But Fraser is your typical, overweight, metabolically unfit, sugar-loving, beer-drinking male. He's basically he creates within him the perfect conditions for disease. Yeah. So it's no surprise that disease manifested itself. In fact, I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier. So anyway, the reason I'm mentioning this is because he's got this rare form of lymphoma, and the NHS are notoriously slow at the best of times. So for those who are listening again from outside of the UK, the NHS is our health system. They're notoriously slow, and because as a result of the pandemic, it's made them even slower, particularly with getting back to people dealing with being in compromised states such as cancer, which is life-threatening situation. Yeah. They're slower than ever before. So knowing that, and knowing what I know about wellbeing sciences and human optimization, I said, Fraser, I need to sit you down and say this lovingly, and I want to inform you with all this information. Anyway, long story short, I informed them. We created this 3-phase program which factored in sleep science, optimizing his sleep, optimizing his immunity, looking at his movement, getting him in saunas. We've done loads of different stuff: cyclical fasting, ketogenic diet, monk fasting, blood work analysis, all sorts of stuff, because that's something that I do as well as blood work interpretation. Anyway, long story short, 5 months later, he's lost 26 pounds. Wow. He's fasting regularly. His energy has returned. He's his old vibrant self again. He's down to, I think he's lost like 4 or 5 inches off his waist. But more importantly, he went to the doctors. He done follow-up scans. He doesn't even need chemotherapy anymore, and he might not even need radiotherapy. The cancer, which was clearly visible, is now almost invisible.
I think it's so interesting. I mean, the more I learn about, my partner's a naturopathic nutritionist, and she's been studying, this stuff for over 10 years and going on at me about it. But you know, in my view, the more I know, the more I realize that, you know, so much of the disease around is actually caused by the inflammation and lifestyle and stress. But unfortunately, you can't make money out of that. So they'd rather, the pharmaceutical companies would rather just give it to lots of different labels and pump people full of drugs. But I love that when someone's like, do you know what? I've fucking done something about it with your help. And guess what? I'm not saying everything, you know, has disappeared, but you've seen a marked change. And you said something.
Oh, market change.
He's his old self again, but he's a different man.
Yep. And by the way, that he actually in that time, and we know that cancer, if you look at Otto Warburg's research, he won the equivalent of the Nobel Prize, or maybe he did win a Nobel Prize, something to that effect, back in, you know, I think it was the 50s or something like that. Either way, that research showcased that, you know, sugar fueled cancer. And I just want to say this though, however, fortunately, fasting and ketogenic diets and reduced, you know, caloric intake and such things, the type of cancer that Fraser has, lymphoma, is very responsive to fasting. Other cancers aren't as responsive. They are responsive, but not as responsive. And so I just want to make that caveat, just in case anyone's listening and thinking, I'm not going to contact my doctor, maybe they're in a compromised situation. I work in combination. I have affiliations with a private clinic. I'm educated in this space, and we also work in tandem with the GP. So I'm not against, I'm not like one of these people who's like, I hate the system. Look, the system is what it is, and it is a bad system. And there is a lot of, you know, they shouldn't be called conspiracy theories because the system is against us in many ways. However, that is a system, and I'm not one for fighting against that, because I think in a sense it's wasted energy. I'm all about like one pointed focus. How can I help the individual? What do we know? Let's look under the threshold of conscious awareness. You know, I just thought it was important to make that caveat that you know, lymphoma is particularly responsive to certain treatments. I
think it's so important though to show that, you know, you don't have to just rely on a pharmaceutical intervention for everything. It can be, like you say. But do you know what? It takes hard work and it takes dedication. It takes doing the right things. I think for me, one of the big frustrations is if people are making the effort to make a change but doing the wrong thing, you know, they're running up the wrong path, even though they're making the effort. Exactly. But the other thing, I mean, on the flip of that as well, I know you'd written about like mental training, and you'd said most people don't even know what mental training is. And I think that a lot of illness could be, what's the word, you know, avoided if people had better mental training. To be like, well, I won't eat all this shit. I won't smoke. I will exercise more. You know, I won't get so stressed. I agree wholeheartedly. Mental, you know, if you look at the root of all we experience, it's our thoughts. And people think, you know, people think about things like, you know, The Secret. And The Secret took a lot of shit because, you know, ask, believe, and you shall receive. But they didn't give any substance. They didn't explain the science of that. And there is science to explain it. And that's why I say, you know, thoughts are the root of all we experience. Thoughts become things. What do I mean by that is, you know, one thought can create an emotion. It can create a cascading of emotions, which can then influence your behaviors and how you act, what you do. And those actions, well, they influence your results. And those results, they become themes of your life. And so if you want to change the themes of your life and what's going on in your results, then you have to start with the root of all we experience. You know, to change the visible world, we have to change the invisible world. And that's why, and mental training was a game changer for me. I'm not someone who is trying to appear perfect here. You know, part of one of the biggest keys to me being able to go on this journey and continue to evolve and progress was mental training. Everything is psychological. There's a lot of spiritual as well. And by spiritual, I mean things that are, a lot of people don't resonate with that word. This is why I'm giving a definition. Because I didn't at the time when I first encountered that word. Spiritual just means anything that's non-tangible. So hope, faith, gratitude, optimism, those sorts of things. But coming back to mental training, you know, if I'm on stage and I say, you know, I ask the room, who in here does mental training, it does some form of physical training, even speed walking or something like that, yoga, running, CrossFit, everybody's hands up, you know, and because no one uses Ubers 24/7 or can levitate. So everyone does some form of physical training. But then if I ask the follow-up question about mental training, maybe 5% of people put their hand up. And that's everywhere and anywhere I ask that question. The big problem is that no one even knows what it is to mentally train. So how, therefore, can they engage with it? You know, and mental training is just like physical training in the sense that, you know, there's certain exercises when it pertains to physical training that you can engage with
to create corresponding physical benefits. I'm simplifying here, but
yeah,
if you want to get strong, you lift heavy stuff. If you want to become more flexible, you work on your mobility and you do your stretches. And if you want to build your endurance, you run at pace over long distances. Again, I'm simplifying, but there's certain exercises that we know that we can engage with to create those corresponding physical benefits.
Yeah.
However, it's the same with, there's a lot of parallels with mental training, but it's just that people don't know the specific exercises to create the corresponding mental benefits, you know, these empowering states like hope, faith, resilience, more love, more calmness, more contentment, to make their highs higher and more sustained and their lows less low and less often, you know, to be able to shift their state. And you can do that by learning, you know, about mental training. For me, mental training, just for everyone listening, is like imagine an umbrella. That's the umbrella term. And then below that are all the different practices. So evolutionary psychology is a topic, state shifting, you know, memory, there's others, you know, there's tons of stoicism, philosophy of the mind, and then there's practices attached, there's exercises attached to those practices underneath that framework of mental training, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you know, to understand it is to really be able to change your life. You know, and by the way, when it comes to, when I said earlier on, your thoughts influencing your feelings, and your feelings influence your actions, and your actions influence your results, my neuroscience lecturer at university gave me a different definition of feelings, of that word feelings. You know, we think of that word feelings in quite a shallow way. So thoughts, feelings, kind of use those words interchangeably, but we don't really think about it beyond, you know, how we use it in everyday life, quite shallowly. But Professor Kerry Kilborn told me, and this was again a game-changing shift, that emotions and feelings are measurable neurological factors. They can be tracked, traced, hacked for you, by you, in service of improving your life. So they are measurable neurological factors that can be tracked, traced, hacked, influenced for you, by you. And, you know, if you put those two things together, your thoughts influence your feelings, your emotions influence how you act, and your actions dictate your results and the themes of your life. And those emotions are measurable neurological factors. Think about The Secret, you know, ask, believe, and you shall receive. Where's the substance? There's the substance. You know, you know, when you think a thought, you're laying a new neural trace in your brain. You take action in that, like just like tarmac on a road, asphalt, you know, it becomes strengthened and strengthened. You add more and more layers to it. And that's how, that's, you know, think of the Greek word plastos. It means, you know, to mold a new you. And that's where the word neurogenesis comes from. You know, you're generating a new you, you're molding, neuroplasticity, should I say, plastos, molding a new you. So yeah, the power of mental training is significant. And there's so many different forms.
I love these conversations because I'm trying to think who it was. I spoke to ages ago. Who was it I spoke to? And it was about trying to explain to people, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you know, where someone's experience of the world is coming from. And I think it's going to come to me who it was, but said similar to you, like, let's say you were in a crowd and you said, like, where is your experience from the world coming from? And some people would be like, well, from them and what they're doing to me and what have you. And you're like, let's bring it in a little bit more and think more about, you know, as you said, because I feel like some people are like prisoners in their own mind because of, you know,
I used to be like that. And now there's nothing I love to do more than be in my mind.
Yeah.
It's a weird change of circumstances.
This is why the podcast I love, because I always say it's thought-provoking content. And, you know, the big thing is I learn from the men I speak to. And sometimes it can be that someone might listen to an hour or whatever, and they might only take one golden nugget away, but that can be the thing that really helps them. And one of the things I was going to ask you about was, because the big thing about that is, I mean, most adults wouldn't understand what mental training is. So there's no fucking chance for the kids, because none of us were taught as youngsters any of this at all in the first place. And I know you touched on, I think you said it was less than, was it 5% of the curriculum?
Global Western curriculum is dedicated to health, wellbeing and self-improvement. Yeah,
I mean, they're too busy at the moment poking woke agendas down their throats to actually, deal with anything else. And
what's interesting, Anthony? So I don't want to bring this up too much, but because people might feel hard done to, but there is a system, and it is is against us, and by us, what I mean is sort of your average man, woman, working class, middle class. And what I mean by this, with respect to that global Western curriculum, 5%, the system is broken.
Yeah.
An interesting exercise to engage in is to look at your common curriculum of your average public school today, the stuff that we experienced, religious education, home economics, take your 50 pence into school and make an apple tart, sorry, and PE, which I think has great value, but there's not enough of that. It should be mandated every morning in school, in my opinion. And there's a load of other classes that just aren't relevant. But there are other classes that are missing from that curriculum, and they're not embedded in that. And it's been that way for the longest time, for us, for your parents, for their parents. But if you put our curriculum side by side to a private school's curriculum, I've worked with public schools and private schools, they get access to wellbeing sciences. They get access to entrepreneurial skills, which involves confidence, debating skills, how to start a business, how to grow a business, economics, physics, how to handle money. And they get speakers like me in because they have higher budgets. So how is that fair? It's just an exercise that I feel is interesting. And, the global Western curriculum, when I say that, I mean the global working class, middle class Western curriculum. It's very different for, the bourgeoisie, proletariat, the uppers and the lowers, if you want to call it that. And that's how they end up running the country. Yeah,
no, I think it's so interesting because we can't expect the majority of our workforce to be able to take care of themselves if they haven't been given the tools. And that's why I hope that, like you said, going into schools or even youngsters being able to have access to podcasts and things like that these days, that they can, if they want to, they can absorb in their own time and make their own mistakes and what have you.
And that's powerful, in my opinion, because I talk about, that Miyagi effect that I experienced. Your mentors don't always have to be at close proximity. Yeah. Tony Robbins, you mentioned Tony Robbins, he is fast. That man is a special man. And he taught me, it's not about your resourcefulness. You mentioned the word relentless earlier on. It's not about your resourcefulness. It's about your resources. I have no silver spoons. I was hit with all the spoons. My mother is psychologically unstable, has been suicidal, has depression. Multiple of my family members are either, dead before 50, 60, they're sick, they're on the dole, taking advantage of the system, scrimping and scraping for low-hanging fruit. I wasn't exposed to these sorts of messages, but it's about your resourcefulness. It's not about your resources. I never had money. I wasn't given, I didn't have any inheritance. I wasn't taught any of these messages. And, I think that, I utilize people like Brendan Burchard in the early stages, and Tony Robbins and Jack Canfield and people like these and other experts through books. You can have a conversation with someone who's 2,000 years old, Aristotle, a fascinating guy who lived in an era where there wasn't as many distractions, which means they're more likely to pursue a passion in their craft. Yeah. And you're going to pick up a lot from those individuals. So, you can buy a book for £6, £10, £15, and you can immerse yourself in that. So there are really no excuses.
You're right. I think that's...
You are your own obstacle, as the saying goes.
It's an important one to remember because, I see now I was in this bracket. I used to watch football all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, I love football, playing it, watching it, et cetera, et cetera. But when you think back, my weekends, especially when I lived on my own, was, probably on a Thursday, Friday, I'd be out in a city or on a date. So Saturday, I'd go to the gym or go to football. And then you'd come home, you'd watch football highlights, you'd watch Match of the Day. And then Sunday, you'd probably get up and watch, football highlights that you might have already watched, but watch them again just in case. And then you watch 2 games and then, then you probably play FIFA. I was like, fuck me, I wasted so much of my time.
Yeah, I did that too.
Yeah, I could have been doing much more important stuff. So that's why now, we all go through phases, I think, of our life. And as men, 20s for me was partying. 30s, I started to grow up and look around. In my, mid to late 30s, I really feel like I grew up a lot very quickly. And now I don't ever watch the news. I never, ever buy newspapers. And we don't watch terrestrial TV at all. Why would we need a TV license? And I don't you have to consume all the time, but I do stuff that enlightens and enriches me instead of watching the news and the bullshit and the fear and the propaganda. And that's one of the things I was going to ask for you, because often guys will say to me, well, let's talk about motivation, as it were. Well, how do I stay motivated? And I was like, well, you know, let's ask Ross his thoughts, because motivation, I guess, is another fleeting feeling, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I could talk all day about this, about motivation and the psychology of what drives us. But I feel that for me, sample of one, and I think it's relevant to most people, to be honest. Now, people talk about you want to be able to get to the position where you're tap dancing your way to work, or whatever you classify as work. Now, to be able to do that, I think it all comes down to self-awareness. And what is self-awareness? You know, for me, the deeper you go, the more you know about yourself, the self, the quicker and further you will grow. And self-awareness is, I mean, intimate knowledge. I mean, a love affair with wanting to know and knowing about you. You know, what are you, and not just like a SWOT analysis, like basic entrepreneurial shit, like, you know, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity. You know, I am talking about your strengths and your weaknesses. I'm talking about, you know, but what I mean by strengths and weaknesses is this. So in positive psychology is an interesting topic. Psychology for the last, you know, few hundred years has been a disease model. How do we get people from a negative place back to baseline? Positive psychology comes along, says, hold my beer. And we've got another focus here. What about +3, +9, +99? What about helping individuals realize their potential, live happier, healthier, more successful and fulfilling lives?
Yeah. And
they talk about, so happiness. Let's look at happiness. I know we're talking about motivation, but there's, you know, there's some overlap.
Yeah.
So you get happiness, and the common culture, a lot of people associate happiness with the raw sense pleasures, you know, masturbation, let's just call it how it is, right? Masturbation, drugs, pharmaceutical, illegal, you know, coffee, ice cream, playing FIFA, as you mentioned, you know, buying that wee pug dog, focusing on what work tops you want. And I'm not saying those things are bad, honestly, because I do some of those things, maybe too much, some of those things. But what I mean by that is, according to positive psychology, that should be the cherry on the cake. You know, some of those things shouldn't make up they shouldn't be how we fulfill all our happiness quotient. They should be 5 or 10%. But the other two factors that make up a happy and meaningful life, people don't know about. And number one is your strengths. Knowing what they are and engaging with them daily. And by the way, when I'm talking about strengths, what I mean by this is when it comes back to the self-awareness piece. It is your strengths are a combination of what you were born with and what you've experienced throughout your life. These things coalescing, coming together to create, you know, call it your core genius, unique strengths. You can't have mine, Anthony, and I certainly can't have yours. And every one of us has multiple strengths based on what we're exposed to and what we've experienced through life. Now, we may not know that. Most of us don't. And sadly, some of us never get to know that because we don't understand the concept of self-awareness, and we don't know how to penetrate deep, and we don't understand the quality of journaling, pondering, self-reflection, and quality questions. So if a happy life, you know, to lead a happy life, there's 3 components. One is that hedonic Hollywood lifestyle, raw sense pleasures, and that's fine. Ice cream, a nice bowl of vanilla ice cream, chocolate, whatever, but that should only be 5%. Then you've got strengths, which is knowing your high strengths and engaging with these daily. And then you've got to live the meaningful life. It's knowing your high strengths, engaging with these daily, but in service of something greater than you. So there's tests that you can do, and let me touch on those. So for example, a couple of my high strengths, social intelligence. Now, you know, and by the way, strengths are not what you put in the bottom third of a CV. So social intelligence, you know, the ability to build relationships effortlessly, to feel confident and competent in any type of social situation. Why is that the case for me? And by the way, that could be the case for someone else, but it's also important how you justify that is your core strength. Now, again, coming back to these things, it's what you're born with and what you've been exposed to over the years. So I was born with a gregarious nature. I was a cute baby, call it how it is. I got a lot of attention, and that attention was generally positive, so I wasn't then afraid of people, and also I was raised in a family where there was an open door policy. So my grandmother was like, you know, bring everyone in. My mother was the same, bring in everyone in. You know, you don't, if you can't stay at this young man's house, then they can come and have a sleepover with you and play FIFA, that type of thing, right? So that was just the way of my family. They're like a Scottish, Irish, Italian family. And that was useful for me because I was then always around about different people. And growing up, I got myself into loads of different tricky situations. So I've worn different hats. I've been a stripper and a topless butler. I've been a drug dealer. I've been a drug addict. I've met the 37th richest man in the world, Michael Dell. I'm now a consultant. I was a semi-professional athlete at one point. I've attempted to break world records. Not only have I taken, not only have I seen people take heroin and sat next to people taking heroin, but I've taken it. So, and I've been all these different situations. I've had my lights punched in. I've been at parties. I've spoken on stage in front of tens of thousands. So I've been in so many different situations and involved with so many different sects of society. That gives me a strength. Yeah. But by the way, that strength took me a long time to figure out, because often your highest strength is the one that you can't see. But there's clues everywhere. For years, my grandmother would say to me, Ross, when she was talking about me to other people, Ross could speak to Tam the devil. So Tam is a nickname for someone called Thomas in Scotland. Tam and the devil. Tam the devil. It's just a way of saying he can speak to anyone from anywhere. Yeah. And I didn't realize that, I'm in a queue and I'm talking to this old lady and we're best friends after 3 minutes. I can engage, and I'm in a flow state, and I love that. So, by the way, I just got my little girl, I think, has been put down. So my wife was at the window there, just saying 5 minutes kind of thing. So let me wrap up this point, Anthony. So for anyone who's wanting to go deeper into self-awareness, which I would encourage them to do so, to be able to gain an insight into their strengths and then live a more engaged life, because ultimately, when you understand yourself and you know what you want and what you love to do, that's where you become motivated every single day to get up and do it no matter what, in spite of the challenges and setbacks. Because you're not always going to feel motivated. That's a misnomer, that's a complete misconception. But you're going to feel more motivated than the average person. Because I love doing what I do. I would do it if I had £10 million to bank. This is what I'd be doing. Yeah. Right? I don't, sadly, but this is what I'd be doing. But you can only do so much of something all the time. But I am very motivated and highly motivated. So quite quickly, jump onto AuthenticHappiness.org. I've done so many psychometric tests, but this is the most profound and most significant one I've ever done in my life. AuthenticHappiness.org. It's Martin Seligman, the founding father of positive psychology's website. You go on there and take the signature strength test, or the authentic strength test, or the core strength test. There's a drop down for surveys. Yeah. It'll be there. It's about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And what I would encourage listeners to do, and you also, Anthony, if you've never done this, is to take the test. It will give you probably 5 to 7 of your core strengths. Then go and find 1 or 2 people who you trust and ask them what, there's 24 character strengths. Show them the list and say, what 3 of these or 5 of these do you feel best embodies me? And you have to do it with people you trust, because some people, especially when you're younger, will laugh at you and judge you, and you don't want that in this space. So let's say it's your wife and your best friend, and you might be able to help them do that exercise. So you think about what your strengths are before you do the test. You do the test, you get this objective data set, you ask 2 or 3 other people, and then you start to look for patterns. And maybe, let's say, it's curiosity or appreciation of beauty and excellence, or gratitude, or like me, social intelligence, boldness. And then what you start to do is you go out there into the field of life and you start to experiment, and you start to say, oh, when I did that, think about when time stops, in a flow state, for example. Was I utilizing one of my signature strengths tests? When you embodied excellence, think about, was I actually engaging with one of my strengths there? And it takes some time, but it's a worthwhile endeavor, because then you've got all these data sets and you're engaging with them in life. For example, how can I exercise my love of social intelligence? Well, it helps me with networking. How am I able to get in situations where I'm talking to the UFC? Part of that is, relentlessness, but part of it is social intelligence, understanding how to talk to people, because I've been doing that. I know now that it's a strength. And so I can engage with that strength and utilize it in my favor, not just, to progress my career, but for happiness and fulfillment. So hopefully I've synthesized that enough there.
I'll tell you why, as you were saying, I was thinking also, it's one of those things, I write the Whole Man Academy e-letter, which goes out, I think I've written about 170 of them now, but they go out every Tuesday and Friday to men all around here and there. And it's always great to find, some different kind of tests or things that guys really like, just kind of looking at. So I can sense in a week or two's time when it comes to release, I'll put all that in the e-letter for the guys so they can work their way through it. Well, I know it's we've already taken up some of your valuable time, especially if you've got little ones to kiss goodnight.
I could sit here, honestly, if you want to do it again, I could sit with you and chat for 2 hours. It's just it's Friday evening. My little girl's 14 months old. She has to be put down. She needs to have her daddy read a storybook to her to calm her. So duties must, duties call.
No, I totally understand. I know I'm going to go in and be throwing like some Thomas the Tank books or something like that from my boys when I get in. But and
it's authentic to the channel. Whole Man Academy. Not all of us are single and 24.
Yeah, if I could just do 1 day a week when I was single, that would be nice. But that's another story. But look, I totally appreciate all your time and your knowledge as well. And I definitely think we need to do this again because we've probably got a few more little rabbit holes we can go down.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I would love that. It's been a pleasure. And if anyone wants to reach out, I actually don't do the social media thing that much. You know, when I go to write my first book and, you know, I publish that and I do plan on doing a lot more social media. I do have a website, a new website that's just about to launch. So if anyone, you know, feels the need to reach out, ask me a question, you know, you'll be able to find that on my new Instagram page. Currently, I've got an Instagram page. It's the Motivational Dude. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, as you did, Anthony. And ping me a message and let me know, you know, if you enjoy the show or if you want to reach out or whatever.
If you thought we were funny, which of course we are.
Yeah, but, and hopefully next time we can go down some more light-hearted paths as well.
Yes, well, who knows? Maybe we'll do it in person as well, which would be nice.
Yeah, that would be cool, especially if you're from London, Anthony, because I miss going down to London, and it looks as though I'm going to be down London in the future, working with some clients, maybe in the next few months. So we'll keep in touch, and maybe we can do this in person.
Sounds like
who knows? Maybe one of those amazing events you were telling me about, which sounded just awesome, might very well happen again in London, and you know we might be standing on a stage side by side speaking, which would be really cool.
I look forward to it. It's one of those things you never know with these things how like the universe will provide an opportunity for us. But right, well, I will let you go, my friend, and you enjoy your evening, and I will speak to you soon.
Likewise. Have a nice weekend, mate. It's been a pleasure. Take care, guys.
Thanks for listening. Remember to sign up to our game-changing weekly e-letter that's read by men around the world. Sign up at wholemanacademy.com/movement. Until next time.